yeah, I'm just happy it's not my fault.
Okay. Says. No, don't want to do that. Then this go. Perfect. Yay. Okay. So give me a second. Whew. Technical difficulties. I'm so sorry we're starting late, but welcome to Scaled Down Livestream, where we dive into everything about downsizing, aging, and everything in between. I'm your host, Natalie Lewin of Lux Transitions, and each week we bring you expert advice, personal stories, and practical advice to help you navigate these important life transitions. So today we are honored to have Detective David Kofi, who has dedicated over 25 years to serving with Toronto Police Services. With a focus on criminal investigation and community outreach, Detective Kofi's career has been marked by an unwavering commitment to justice, victim advocacy, and crime prevention. We're excited to hear his insights and learn how we can all stay safer in our communities. Thank you for joining us, Detective Kofi.
Thank you very much for having me, Natalie. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem. And you know what? Before we dive in, I always like to ask, how's your summer going?
It's going well. It's going to get a little bit better soon. We have a vacation planned in the next few weeks, so that'll be nice. My holidays so far have been taken up by my backyard deck project, which has now evolved into a landscaping project. So it's it's one of those things that have it just keeps going and going and going. I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, so I'm getting there. And at least I have my barbecue set up on it now, so it's it's all good.
That is perfect. So 25 years in the force. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, 25 years. It's unbelievable. People have always said it goes really fast, and when it's gone, it's really mind-boggling how fast it's gone. So 25 years last month was my 25th anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. I was one of the last classes of the last millennium, I always like to say, because it was 1999. I moved to Toronto when I got hired. I grew up in London, Ontario.
Okay.
And then I worked there for a little bit, went to school there for a little bit, and then got hired here. Moved here. I'd never lived in Toronto. My father had grown up in Toronto, but I'd never lived here. So I just visited for Blue Jay games and Maple Leaf games and the exhibition and things like that. So yeah, I came 25 years ago. They asked me, where do you want to work? Which side of the city do you want to work in? And I was like, well, I've always been a West End guy, so I'd like to be somewhere in the West. I'd like it to be busy because I was still young and keen at the time. And they put me in 12 Division for the first 10 years. Okay. And 12 Division is a busy area. Black Creek and Trethewey is where the station is. So you've got a lot of different demographics, a lot of different challenges, fantastic people everywhere. Of course, 99% of the people are always fantastic. We just have the misfortune of running into the 1% and things. Right. So, yeah, so I did 10 years at 12 division. And when you're starting out, you go through the various offices. You go into community response. You do that for 6 months or so. I started going into more the investigative realm at that point. I was in a detective office for a year as a temporary, and then I went permanent for another 2, 3 years. And then I ended up in the fraud office because a buddy of mine worked in the fraud office there. And I had just had my eldest daughter had just been born. And so I didn't want to be working night shift and evenings and missing all that life stuff. So I worked
And
3
giving your
years.
wife a hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was, and it's funny. I always say, I mean, it's an exaggeration to say my kids ruined my career because they didn't. They didn't. They just changed it because your priorities change, of course, with children, and my priority was being home with them.
Right.
So I didn't want to work the night shifts and the evenings and all that stuff. So I transitioned to the fraud office at 12 division, which was Monday to Friday day shift.
Perfect.
Which was perfect for that. And then, and then time goes on and I get promoted and end up in 14 division.
Right.
Same thing, investigative detective office there for 3 years. And then I was in youth services for a couple years, and I supervised the fraud guys in 14.
Okay.
And then long story short, in 2020, one of my former staff sergeants became the detective sergeant here at Financial Crimes. He knew my fraud background. He knew I was supervising frauds, and he said, hey, why don't you come on down here? My first question was, well, what's your schedule? Because I got a pretty good schedule right now. I'm working day shift again. And he said, yeah, our schedule is the same, Monday to Friday, day shift and stuff like that, with a few other little perks and stuff like that.
So your kids helped your career.
Exactly. Yes, it depends who I'm talking to when I say they either hurt it or helped it. So
right.
You're right. I'm here literally because of my children being born, as you could say. So, yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
So, what are the most common scams targeting older adults in Toronto?
Yeah. Sadly, it's the elder community is the most targeted. Is the single most targeted community. There's a lot of different reasons for that. One is that it's relatively well known that the seniors community doesn't like to report as much. I mean, fraud is one of the most underreported crimes there is already. It's estimated that only 5 to 10% of all frauds are reported, which when you look at the numbers of the ones that are reported, it's mind-boggling how much fraud is going on. Wow. But our senior community, they're targeted for a number of reasons. They're often perceived as, having more access to money. So their mortgages of their homes, they've owned their homes for significantly longer. If you're going to do a mortgage fraud, you want to do it on a house that has no existing mortgage.
Right.
So that's the primary reason. They have their life savings. They have their pensions.
Right.
They often live alone. They're often isolated from, not often, but, they don't live with their children anymore.
And their significant other could be deceased.
It could be deceased. They could be alone.
Right.
So they're targeted. And I always say one of my favorite things to do, and one of our priorities here for what I do, is getting out and talking to the communities. That's why I was so enthused when I got your invitation, because this is what I love to do, is to get the word out, kind of thing. Right. And I always talk about, when I talk to the seniors, I talk about vulnerabilities, and every community that's targeted has their own set of vulnerabilities.
Right.
I always say with the senior community, their biggest vulnerability is their love of their family. Mm-hmm. Is their compassion. It's their hearts, essentially.
Right.
And that is where they are targeted by the fraudsters.
Got it.
So, for example, one of the big ones that's specific to grandparent scams is the grandparent scam.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that one?
No.
No? So it's particularly heinous. Uh, an elderly person will receive a phone call. The person
Oh,
on the other end of the line will impersonate a loved one, a grandchild.
right. Yeah. Okay.
Um, and it's evolved. So a lot of times they're just doing mass phone calls, thousands of phone calls, one after the other, waiting for that elderly sounding voice. Or they may have done some research. They may know there's an elderly person living there.
Right.
And really all they're doing is the victim will answer, and the person will say something like Nona or Opa or Grandma or Grandpa, because
Right.
sometimes they often know what the name is, so they'll guess kind of thing. And they'll impersonate a loved one, a grandchild,
Right.
and say, "Grandma, I need your help. I'm in trouble." They'll
Right.
often say they've been arrested. They'll often say they've been in an accident, and through no fault of their own, the police found drugs in the car. It wasn't theirs, of course. It was their friends. They didn't know it was there.
Right.
But they find themselves in jail, and they say, "Grandma, you need to help me. I'm going to pass the phone." Oftentimes, they'll pass the phone off to a lawyer, somebody else who says they're a lawyer or
Right.
a police officer, which particularly upsets us, of course.
Of course.
And that person will say, to get your grandson out of jail this weekend, you need to come up with $7, 8, 9, $10,000
Right.
in cash. And so they'll often convince them, go to the bank, get the cash, we'll come to your door, we'll pick it up, your grandson will get out of jail.
So yeah, so I have heard of those scams, and I guess I think that how does that happen? Like, how come there was no, let me call so and so to check,
Right.
and how come they didn't recognize the voice or that it was
Right.
somebody different? And then my thoughts are that, hey, that must be a small number, but it sounds like it's actually greater than my perception. And if only, I think you said 5 to 10% of fraud is even reported,
Yeah.
what am I hearing?
Yeah. So those are all really good questions. It really came to in prevalence during COVID. So during the voice would often be, "Oh, I'm wearing a mask," or they'd say, "I have a cold," or they'll say, "I was in a car accident and my nose is broken." They'll always have a reason. Um, part of their spiel is, and these people who are calling have scripts, and they're practiced at them, and they're professional at them. This is what they do. This is their job. They're very manipulative, and they're very forceful. And one of the things they will tell the person is, "You can't tell anybody." They'll either say, "Oh, there's a court order that there's like a vow of silence. You're not allowed to say anything, or else they won't let me out." The grandson may say, "Don't tell mom or dad. You know what'll happen if you tell them." And a lot of times it's just hit and miss, right? A lot of times it's just the planets align for these people, because the grandparent who answers the phone, maybe they've got a grandson who does get into trouble.
Yeah.
Maybe they've got a grandson who, maybe their son, the father, maybe they know he's a little rough. Maybe he knows they're very strict, or he's going to get yelled at. He's going to get in big trouble, and they're trying to protect their grandson. So, but at the end of the day, they're responding to the fraudsters, the script that they're saying.
Right.
They're appealing to all their, pulling the heartstrings. "Please, Grandpa, don't tell my mom. Don't tell Dad." Those kind of things. Like, those are always questions that we ask the people afterwards, and oftentimes the victim will say, "I knew it. I knew it didn't sound like my grandson.
Right.
I knew this didn't make sense. But what if it's true?"
Right.
Right? They'll always fall back on compassion and love. So we always tell people, listen to that voice that's telling you, that's raising these red flags in the back of your mind, because those voices come from experience.
Mm-hmm.
life experience, and who has better life experience than our senior citizens.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they're always tragic, they're always heartbreaking, um, and really each successful victim is maybe the 1,000th phone call. So many people say, yeah, whatever, and hang up, or I don't have a grandson, or
Right.
they'll say, oh, keep him in jail, you know. But every now and then, and all they need is one victim can result in
Yeah.
10, 15, $25,000.
Yeah, it's a numbers game to them. So they just keep
Exactly.
doing. And as you said, it's their job.
Exactly.
So go until you hunt until you catch something.
Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the grandparent scam. It's still going on. Investment scams, romance scams. You know, elderly, they, like we talked about, they may be widowers or widowed. They may be alone. COVID, again, COVID fraud exploded during COVID.
Right.
2020, I think the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center had maybe $200 million a year in fraud. We're up to almost $600 million a year now.
Wow. So
it tripled. Plus, on top of that is they don't include Toronto numbers. So
wow.
prior to 2023, we didn't keep our own numbers,
Okay.
but now we do. So now we're able to say, right now, I believe we're up to just under $300 million
Wow.
as of today. So we're on par for about 400 million in Toronto alone. So
Wow.
if you add that to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, there's $1 billion.
And we're a city, and it's not even a province, just for
Right.
So,
right. And then multiply that by 10 or 20, depending on what the 5 or 10% reported, right? So it's mind blowing the immensity of think today.
So let me ask you, there's a few questions I have for you based on what you shared with us. But why do you think there's such a significant increase in the amount of fraud since 2020 till now?
Right. So the first answer is COVID. People were more isolated. People became more reliant on their computers to do things.
Okay.
Remember, we were locked down. We couldn't go to the mall. We were shopping online.
Right.
We were banking online.
Right.
We were communicating online.
Okay.
Fraudsters are always they're always at the spear point of technology. So wherever technology goes, they've already figured out a way to manipulate it and exploit it for their own ends. So cryptocurrency became prevalent the last number of years.
Right.
Cryptocurrency is heavily utilized by fraudsters.
Yeah, because there's no tracing it, right?
And it goes across the globe in a millisecond and it's gone.
Okay.
And it's really hard to trace. So for Toronto, we're a municipal police service. So we can take reports in where cryptocurrency was lost, and we can now send it to our intelligence unit and have it traced to see where it went. But when we find out it went to Malaysia or it went to China or it went to Russia, we're really limited, unfortunately, in getting that money back and bringing those people to justice type thing. So, the answer is technology and COVID are the two big things. Now we have artificial intelligence, which is the latest technological breakthrough. And again, we're seeing fraudsters utilizing it before even most of us understand it, kind of thing. So
AI is such a blessing, but such a curse.
Right.
So some of the things that you're seeing. So when they can now duplicate somebody, not just their picture, but now a motion picture, that's scary.
Yeah. Well, when you think about a romance fraud, where you're literally having a relationship with somebody online, like this, what the face that you see of mine, this is me. I could have myself be Brad Pitt if I wanted to, and be talking and using the same gestures. So that's what fraudsters with the romance scam are doing. they're having, they're having communication across the ocean,
Right.
and the face that the victim is seeing on screen is not the face of who they're talking to. It's
That's
all part of the lie and everything like that. So, and it's also being utilized for terms. Even our financial institutions are susceptible to it because their employee or their clients, they're calling in from anywhere in the world and saying, "Hey, send the money here or send money here. Change this. Change my number. Change this." And it appears to be their client who they may or may not know personally, but they're still able to fool them.
So I want to go back a little. What tips would you give in terms of the warning signs to recognize that some type of fraud is happening? So whether it's a romance scam or grandparent scam, financial, what would you share with us to help us keep ourselves safer?
Well, sadly, the majority of people don't realize they've been defrauded until after it's happened. It may have been because they're ignoring the warning signs that they had, and maybe they're ignoring the little voice that says, "Slow down here." But once that money is gone, that's usually when they go, "Uh-oh, what did I just do?" kind of thing.
Right.
Prior to that, and that's why education and prevention is like my sole focus in life right now, is to get the word out before the money is lost.
Right.
Identity theft is the root of the majority of all fraud. Once you lose, once your identity is compromised, and we see every day these data breaches happening in major companies across the globe. It's really, it's almost impossible to understand how our identity information is going to be used. It can be used to take over our bank accounts. It can be used to create other bank accounts with other banks.
Right.
It can be used for mortgage fraud,
Yeah.
mortgage theft. It can be used for anything. So really, people need to be really wary of their online presence.
Okay.
What they're doing on their computer. You need to be really super critical of anything that comes into your computer or your phone.
Okay.
As soon as you hand your kid a phone, when they turn 11, 12, 13, 14, you're basically making them susceptible to fraud, because that is how the fraudsters get us, through our phones and through our computers.
Okay.
I don't know, you may have gotten some already today. I'm regularly getting, "Hey, great job opportunity, click this link."
Right.
Or we're getting, emails from the CRA, or emails from Amazon, packages and stuff like that. And really, the fraudsters are counting on sending out thousands upon thousands upon thousands of these emails. They just need a few people to click.
Right.
And by clicking on those links, you could be introducing malware into your computer.
Yeah.
Which they could now they own your computer. They can see everything they're doing. They're seeing every click on the keyboard that you're making.
And then they see our passwords, I guess. So
they see the passwords. Social media, be really, it's really sad, and that makes me most upset when it changes the way that we have to operate in the world.
Yes.
Social media should be this great sharing thing where we get together with family and friends.
Yeah.
But social media is information that you're putting out to the world.
Yeah.
And fraudsters live for information, because they take that information and they utilize it. One of the big things we're seeing lately is SIM swaps. So your SIM card swaps.
Okay, SIM swaps. Okay.
And so that is then basically doing their own intelligence on people through what they see in LinkedIn profiles, on their Facebook, learning everything they can, and then gaining information on them, and then switching to SIM, going into a mobile store and saying, "Hi, I'm Dave Coffey. Here's my SIM card, or I need a new SIM card for my phone that I lost. And
Okay.
then when they get that SIM card, they now control my number, which then allows them to bypass I lost my password type
Right.
stuff because it all goes to them.
This is so
So
scary.
it's insidious is what it is. It's absolutely diabolical.
Very. So yeah, I feel like I'm having a little bit of anxiety with this. So I hope others are paying attention and seeing how we need to be vigilant and not just click on links that we get to our phone or our computers. I have a question because I was hacked a few years ago and it was absolutely devastating, and I simply clicked on a link. But I notice sometimes now I will be doing something online, like I purchase something and immediately I'm getting links to my cell phone about the purchase, but I know that it's actually a fraudster. How are they getting this information so quickly? And for the most part, accurate.
Yeah. It's the nature of our technology where whatever we're doing, and I don't want to say Google or Siri or Amazon and all those kinds of things. It's the nature of our websites that we're utilizing. That every website you go into, you'll see a little warning saying we use cookies.
Right.
And those cookies are trackers, basically tracking your activity on your website. And oftentimes those are sold by whatever website you're on too.
Okay.
So whether it be hackers or whether it be, putting into a Google search, refrigerator sales or something like that. It is getting out there that information is then sent out, and you'll inevitably get ads. I know exactly what you mean. It's freaky, really, when you put in something that you're searching for. If you're searching for security cameras or you're searching for speakers, all of a sudden when you go into Google or if you go into another website, you'll see all these ads.
Right.
It's not necessarily fraudsters. If it is fraudsters that fast, then you've got an issue with them having access to your devices, and you need to have it wiped clean pretty much, because you may have malware, you may have a virus involved. Usually it's just the advertisers having access to that information, though.
Okay.
So that makes you feel any better?
It's again, it's like I have to reiterate the vigilance that you need. So I feel like, embarrassingly so, I see, yeah, we use cookies and I just click yes, okay. And I've noticed sometimes you could say no, or you can click what you're allowing and what you're not, but I don't take that time. And I hope I'm alone, but I'm sure that I'm not alone, that you don't take the time to look further into what those cookies are or what we're agreeing to and how we're then leaving ourselves vulnerable to these people. Okay. So can you share a story or example of a fraud case involving an older adult that stands out to you, and share some lessons that you may be able to pass on to our audience so that they can learn from this situation?
Sure. I mean, there's so many, and they're all heartbreaking. I remember, I always think back to one day I was sitting here in my office, and so I work at headquarters downtown here, and we're not a police division per se. So we're not 52 division or 12 division. We have a number of the chief works here. We have our offices that work here, but we don't handle reports. So
Okay.
we don't, people don't come here to make reports. We'll say you need to go to 52 division. But I got a call from the front desk one day, and they asked me, can you just come down and talk to this gentleman? Excuse me. And so I went down, and he was a lovely old man. He was 87 years old or something. And he had in his hand his phone. And she's like, can you explain to him something? I'm like, sure. So he tells me that he had already been the victim of a fraud. So he knew he had been the victim of a fraud. He said he had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars to a fraud. And what fraudsters do, inevitably, 100% of the time, once they get money out of you, it's like they've got a favorite fishing hole. They will always come back.
Oh, really?
They'll always come back to you and say, hey, it may be, they may get you for whatever fraud it is. And then they may call you a week later and say, hey, I understand you're the victim of a fraud. I work for this company. I can get that money back for you. Just send me money. And it's the same people, right? So fraud recovery scam is a big one. So he had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. His family had basically taken custody of his finances because he was very prone to being a victim of fraud.
Right.
So he was literally at that point in time down to, he had an allowance of $50 a week, which he could use whatever he wanted, whichever way he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he had living expenses on top of that and everything like that, but he had access to $50 a week. And he said, they keep calling me. Is this fraud? And essentially he was telling me about these people calling him all the time saying, hey, send him, I forget even why, it was a couple years ago now, but they were still trying to get money out of him.
Wow.
And they knew that he only had $50 a week. And they're like, that's fine, send us the $50. And he still, I felt so bad for him because he still didn't realize that he was being victimized again.
Wow.
And it's dramatic in the mentality, both of the fraudsters, but of the vulnerability of some of any victim. And he was of sound mind and body. He was, from what I could tell, no signs of dementia or anything like that. He was just very vulnerable to this kind of entreaties by these people. And he was always, well, maybe if I give them this money, I'll be able to get this money back.
Right.
So that one always sticks with me. Others are just, I know, like several during COVID, we were investigating several grandparent scams. And a lot of the times what we would do is we would go out to the house, because the fraudsters, once they got the first lump of cash, they would call a couple days later and say, hey, the person you hit with your car is dead. Now we need another $10,000. So they would come back for more again, because that's what fraudsters do. So that's how we started catching them, because after the first time, the person would call us, or they would tell their family, and they would say, no, Mom, Johnny's right here. Nothing, it's fine.
Right. Wow.
So then we would get involved, and we would, but then you get to meet a lot of the victims and stuff. And again, like I said, it's after they've already been victimized. They've already given away $7,000, $8,000 the first time. The video from the bank where we have the victim walking into the bank using a walker and going up to the teller, asking for this cash. And then sometimes having confrontations with the teller, because the banks were getting in tune with it. And they were saying, what do you need the money for? And they're told, tell the bank this, or tell them it's none of their business. And the banks were then part in behind like a rock and a hard place too, because it's essentially their money, right? So it's just heartbreaking. It really is. Romance scams break your heart, because a lot of times, I know I had a call from a son whose father was a victim of a romance scam, had given away hundreds of thousands of dollars to a woman in Puerto Rico whom he never met. And the son knew what was going on, but could not convince the father
that this is what was happening.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what percentage of these scams are caught and brought to justice? And what percentage of the money is recovered, if any?
Yeah. So I don't have a good answer for either. In terms of the money recovered, I should explain that is not our priority, sadly. it's the role of the justice system for us to find the perpetrator, to arrest them, to charge them, to put them before a judge. We have no power to get the money back.
Okay.
It's up to the judge, essentially.
Okay.
So the judge can order restitution orders. Sometimes they do. Oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes when they do, there's no power behind them.
Oh.
Really, for people to get their money back, I always say now, because I've learned a lot about it over the last couple of years, is the civil courts to get your money back, because that's the focus of civil court, is to get money back.
Okay.
And you can do both. You can sue the person if you know who the person is, if it's a business transaction or if it's anything like that. You can sue the person, and you can come to us and we can arrest the person. So we can arrest, charge, convict, put them in jail, give them a record. Oftentimes we can't get the money back because the money's gone.
Wow.
They spent it. In terms of percentage, I mean, we get on average 50 fraud occurrences a day in Toronto, a day.
And
50.
that's 5 to 10% is
Yes.
reported?
Yes.
50 a day.
Yes.
Wow.
So 50 reported, and Toronto Police, we only take reports if there's been money lost.
Okay.
So if you get a text message and you know it's a fraud, you don't call us because we'd be buried, right? We're already swimming in frauds, but those can be reported to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, where they maintain statistics and trends and stuff like that.
Okay.
So 50 a day. We have a system which is much more efficient, because we have here what's called the Central Fraud Intake Office, where all fraud reports come to us first.
Okay.
Whereas before they just used to go to the division wherever the person lived. And so there was no central brain to it, kind of thing. And this was again during COVID, and this was again during as a result of the grandparent scam, because we were asked, how many grandparent scams have we had this year? And we weren't able to answer because they don't come to us.
Right.
So now it's a complete revamping of the Financial Crimes Unit here, May of 2023.
Okay.
All frauds come to us first. Basically, we triage them. So, if they're large enough, multi-jurisdictional, complicated, they'll stay with us here at Financial Crimes Unit, where we do project-based investigations. Or if there's avenues of investigation, so we have suspect info, we have video, we have cameras, we have bank accounts, which we can do production orders into. They'll generally go back to the division from which they came.
Okay.
Sadly, so many of them are, I went online, I searched up Taylor Swift tickets, I sent cryptocurrency to this address, I never met the person, I don't know what they look like, the money's gone. Yeah. Sadly, when they tell us things like that, there's nothing that we can do.
Yeah.
It's very limited, or at least, I mean, for fraud investigations themselves, for us, our projects last months for one investigation, because they're very labor intensive, they're very paperwork intensive. And I don't want to tell everybody that nobody gets arrested for fraud and we never catch anybody, because we do. We do catch people, we do charge them, we do convict them, we do put them in jail. But oftentimes, because of the international nature of fraud too, there's essentially no borders with fraud, right? Because it's generally online.
Right.
There's a lot that's local. So like renovation frauds that come knock on your door and say, hey, you need a new roof. And then they go on your roof and tear it apart and thousands of. So, we'll get those guys because they're here.
Sorry, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
I know in like North Toronto, there was, I think, a driveway frauds. They were breaking up people's driveways and basically forcing them to pay them to clean that mess up.
Yeah.
But I heard maybe a month ago, somebody might have gotten arrested, or I don't know.
So again, that's renovation fraud. It's a laneway, it could be a roof, it could be chimneys, it could be brickwork, it could be window washing, it could be anything. And particularly the elderly are most susceptible to it because they're home, right? And they may be alone, and they may be, there's pressure tactics that these guys use. And if somebody comes to your door and says, "Hey, you've got a huge hole in your roof, it's supposed to rain tonight. You better let me fix it, and I'll be back tomorrow with a crew. Just I just need a down payment. Give me $5,000."
Right.
So that's almost best case scenario where you just hand them cash and you never see them again. But when they come back and literally start tearing up your roof and say, "Oh, it's a lot worse than I thought it was up there. Now I need this." And so yeah, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And with that, and with really any type of fraud, it's to slow everything down. Like they're counting on their pressure tactics working on you. Right. They're counting on urgency. You need us to fix this now. You need to pay us now to get your son out of jail, your grandson out of jail. You need to do this, click this link now, or this is going to happen. Urgency is like a common denominator of all fraud. Okay. So that's a huge red flag. Whenever it's do something now, give me money now, or else this terrible, horrible thing's going to happen. The CRA, pay us now, or we're going to arrest you. Right. New immigrants often get, do this now, pay us now, or we're going to deport you. Right. Things like that. And so I often say, just slow down, because life doesn't, unless it's the actual police knocking on your door, which we don't do for this type of stuff. And the police never show up at your door asking for money, I should say that. Right. But yeah, urgency is a huge red flag. Whenever there's urgency involved, slow down and say, "Whoa, what's going on here?" kind of thing.
So if you were to give 3 pieces of advice to keep yourself safe, what would that be? And I imagine slowing down would be one, but what are two other pieces of advice that our audience can use to keep themselves safe?
So a huge one, again, because so much of this stuff comes through our devices and comes through our computer. You have to be conscious of the information that you're providing, that's public, that's available. Information is gold to these people, to the fraudsters. They will take that information and they'll utilize it. So be conscious of it. One of the things, again, it makes me so upset, an obituary. Think of obituaries. Obituaries have been in newspapers for, as long as there's been newspapers. Right. And what do we put in our obituaries? So-and-so's passed away, survived by. Yeah. What church the service is being performed at, so they know if you're Catholic, if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, whatever faith you might follow. Right. Children, you'll put your children's names. You'll put, all this information. If you just go into an obituary and look at the information that people are putting out there, that is being exploited and used to attack people. So that, again, it's information that we're putting out to the world. The other thing is simple, is don't click on anything that comes into your devices unsolicited. Okay. So if you didn't ask for it and it comes in, delete it. Okay. I'm so quick to delete it. I'm sure I'm deleting some legitimate things, but so far the world hasn't come to an end. They haven't, come and taken my house yet. If I see something come in and I don't recognize it, I'm not expecting it, I didn't ask for it, delete, 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 delete. Okay. Do not click on it. And if you see something that looks legitimate, you can always verify it another way without clicking on the link. If it comes in from your bank, because legitimate services sometimes do send us emails. Right. If it comes into your bank, or if it comes in from the CRA, never click the link, call them. Right. And don't call the number that's in that email. Right. Because that's that's the fraudster's phone number. And you're just calling them and saying, "Oh yeah, click the link." Walk down the street and walk into your bank and say, "Is this real?"
Right.
So that's another thing. The other thing, like you said, is just slow down. Is slow down. I don't like saying use common sense because it sounds like I'm talking down to people, but
Right.
just slow everything down.
Yeah.
Think about what you're being asked,
Yeah.
and talk to family and friends.
Yeah.
Like never. That's the other one. Oh, don't tell your family. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell your bank. I mean that screams fraud.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
keep in touch with your family, your friends.
Your
Slow
community.
down. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, this was fabulous. I have actually so many more questions, so we definitely have to do this again. I think it's so important. And as you mentioned, from 2020 till now, the fraud in Toronto alone has more than tripled.
Yeah.
So we need to keep vigilant. We need to keep community and have these conversations openly with our friends and loved ones and slow down. You
Right.
know, like that's like practical advice for just life. Slow
Yep.
down. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as you guys know, I'm Natalie Lewin of Lux Transitions, a realtor with Keller Williams Portfolio. I specialize in helping older adults 65 plus to scale down to their next chapter. I'm passionate about assisting and educating my people on their journey. So if you or someone you know is considering a transition, please DM me so we can schedule a discovery call. Remember, life is beautiful, and I am here to help you make the most of it. So, with the chill coming in Toronto, let's keep those summer vibes going. Join us next week, same time, same place, as we dive into the sunny world of Naples, Florida real estate with the amazing Donna Robosi. Don't miss out. Let's keep the warmth and excitement alive. Thank you and much love to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.